My name's Jon Boyd. I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel from the U.S. Air Force. Bandit number 289. I'm sitting here at the Pima Air Museum in front of an old friend of mine. Tail number 810, which was an F-117 that I flew in the first Desert Storm, and it happened to have my name on it during those very historic days. So we're now reunited here in southern Arizona for the next stage of our lives. So I got involved in aviation at a very early age, and when I say that, it was probably from the day I was born. My dad was a pilot, and he was a fixed wing pilot all the way back in the 1930s as a teenager because he loved aviation so much. But towards the end of World War II, he, through one thing and another happening, he ended up being a maintainer on the first helicopters that the Army had brought into service in the Pacific Theater. And so he fell in love with helicopters, and that was my introduction to aviation. Was one of my earliest memories at the age of 2. He gave me a ride in one of those bubble canopy Bell 47Gs, and there's a picture of this little 2-year-old with his feet dangling over the seat with the stick at about forehead level. And that was me on my first aircraft ride. So ever since then, I've always been attached to aviation and wanted to do that as a career. So luckily, when it came time to go to college, I was able to get an ROTC scholarship, a pilot slot, and eventually go into the Air Force in the late 70s. And then ended up, I guess, culminating my career with flying the F-117. But along the way, flew a couple of different aircraft trainers. I was an instructor in T-37s at Laughlin Air Force Base. Got several tours in the A-10, which is another one of my loves. And I guess the way you found out about the F-117 back in the day was nobody ever said that because it was a classified program. Just some of your colleagues would disappear. Be so and so, flew A-10s at Alex, which is England Air Force Base, and all of a sudden he shows up in civilian clothes, flying a civilian airplane, and you go, "Did you get out?" He goes, "No, I'm still in." "What are you doing?" "Oh, just some test work." But that little meme starts to build in your head where you go, "Well, okay, what's he doing?" And then another guy disappears, and another guy disappears, and pretty soon it's like, what are you guys doing up there? And they said, "Trust me, if you get the chance, you want to go do this." And so at a certain point in my career, I had that chance, and I said, yeah, so what's it all about? The good news, bad news is you have to sign on the dotted line before they tell you what it is you're going to do. So once you have done that and sworn yourself to secrecy and all this business, then they would finally show you it was like an 8mm film of, we call it the black jet, or back in the day, the asset. And your eyes kind of get wide and go, "Oh, holy crap, that's what I'm into." And then you're like, yeah, okay, no worries, I'm in. So that's kind of how I got established in the black jet through, you just kind of know that something's going on, something interesting, and there's an old aviation adage of never turn down a combat assignment. So my adage that I add to that is you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So take the shot, go follow it, and see where it takes you. An aside about the black jet and its radar evading capabilities, I'm reminded of is that without going in a lot of detail, yeah, it works, okay? And that's one of the reasons I'm still alive today is I flew it into some very ugly places where there's a lot of people said, yeah, we went downtown. I was like, no, you didn't go downtown like we did. You might have sent a weapon in there, but you didn't haul your pink body through there. But there are some I guess you want to call them urban legends that bats used to run into the airplane at night, when it's sitting on the ramp or in the hangar. And I've heard those stories. I've never particularly personally seen a bat commit suicide by hitting a black jet. But I do have one funny story in that when we got back and there was a public demand to bring the jet out and show it to the public. here's your tax dollars at work. And I was, I can't remember where I was, but we had the jet on display at an air show, and it was cordoned off, and the cops were guarding it, and we were there meeting and greeting the public. And there was this gentleman who had a video camera, and back in those days, they were like shoulder-mounted Sony Beta or VHS kind of cameras, but they focused using, I think it was like a sonar beam. And the guy, I just happened to catch out of the corner of my ear where his wife was like, "Come on, let's go look at something." He says, "Well, I'm trying to get this thing in frame, but it won't focus." And I went, "Oh, that's funny." So I just kind of sidled over into the frame and said, "How y'all doing?" And he says, "Oh, okay, it's in focus now." So, so the thing had focused on me, because the jet was like, "No, you can't see me." So that's my personal story of, yeah, the stealth really works, and you know, kudos to the Lockheed folks for figuring that out. Okay, so as I mentioned, behind me is tail number 810, and not only did this airplane have my name on it, but she and I, because her name that I ended up giving her during the war was Dark Angel, she and I had a kind of a checkered past in that each one of those airplanes kind of has its own personality, and you have to learn that. They will sometimes be very, very nice and very compliant with what you're asking it to do, and sometimes it's like, no, I'm not doing this. But 810 ended up breaking on the ramp at Langley as we were headed for Desert Storm, and it stayed behind in the U.S. with the Schoolhouse Squadron, who was training, you know, follow-on pilots. And then somewhere in the middle of the war, it became evident that we needed as many black jets there as we could get, because there were too many targets that needed to be serviced, as the saying goes. So they brought just about everybody else forward, including 810. And that's when my name got put on the jet. And then just because it's war, and just because we're sort of out of reach of supervision, we said, "Oh, I'm going to name the jet." And then the next thing you know, we're putting nose art. In this case, you couldn't put anything on the outside because of the characteristics of the jet, but on the inside of the bomb bay door was where they put the nose art. So that's where the Dark Angel image ended up, on the inside of the left weapons bay. And in the midst of all that, I really only got to fly her once in combat. It was right about the middle of the war. Not a whole lot of specifics that I want to go into other than that it was a challenging mission for myself and my wingman. The two of us were going after targets in the very same area. And so anyway, it was going to be hairy. We had worked out how to survive that. And the next morning, as the sun came up while we were back headed south, was one of those days where you kind of got a new lease on life. It's like, ooh, you know, we managed to survive that. So it's a good day to be alive. So 810, that was the airplane I was flying on that particular mission. There were plenty of other memorable missions, some scary, some satisfying, but all in different tail numbers. And then when it came time to go home, I got selected to be one of the first returnees, which some people were happy about it and a lot of people weren't, because some people have been over there for a long time, and you're living in pretty austere conditions. So, but 810 was the airplane I was going to fly back, and for some reason she just was not really happy with going home. It was a 3-hop trip from Camise to Spain to Langley to, in our case, we were landing at Nellis, and I was number 3 in a 4-ship. The lead was Colonel Whitley. Al Whitley was the wing commander at the time. And every time that airplane that I released the brakes with the power at mill, it would give me a bleed air leak light. And for those of you that don't know what a bleed air leak light is, it's, well, something's kind of hot in the engine area, but we're not sure what. And so it could be a fire, or it could be who knows what. But normally you would say, well, okay, I'm not taking this airplane. But the opportunity to go home, the get-home-itis factor says, all right, so what are the chances it's going to catch on fire? Well, first of all, turn off the bleed air switch, which kills the air conditioner, kills the cockpit pressure. It kills all the air. light goes out. It's like, okay, well, let's keep going. Get airborne, get the gear up, waiting for the first radio call from lead to change channels, and I don't hear anything. So after a couple of minutes, I figure out I'm radio out. And I rocked my wingman in. Luckily, he was another former A-10 driver, and he and I had flown together before and knew each other. So I said, hey, I'm radio out, in sign language, I'm radio out. You got the lead. And so we just kind of pressed on. Basically got ourselves to Spain after I don't know, a 6-hour flight or something. And then the next day as we take off, I'd written it up and told the crew chief. He says, yes, sir, I'll take a look at it. Next morning, taking off out of Zaragoza, bleed air leak light. All right, fine. Get the gear up, get headed west towards home. Radio quits working. So I then tell my wingman the same thing. He's like, okay, I got this. Funny part about the story is he's like, okay, I've got the lead, and he starts making a right turn towards England. And I'm going, that's not good. So I go back up in sign language and kind of rock my wings. I go, no, we're going this way. And he says, okay, well, you got the lead back. So I'm radio out with no air conditioning, no cabin pressure, and a wingman with a bad INS. Luckily, the weather was good, so we just picked up everybody visually and followed them across the Atlantic. Land at Langley, tell the crew chief, yes, sir, I'll write it up. We'll take care of it. Take off out of Langley, bleed air leak light. Radio out. And so I'm like, this is just the way this is going to go all the way home. I thought life was good until we decided to descend out of our flight level to go to Nellis as a force ship. And oh, by the way, the wing commander says, we're going up initial with a force ship. And I'm like, okay, well, nobody's ever done that before. Fingertip formation, which is fairly close wingtip to wingtip formation, was something you didn't do in the blackjet. You were by yourself most of the time, not talking to anyone because you had your antennas pulled in. And so it's like, okay, well, we're going to be a force ship coming up initial. As we drop out of the flight level and into the weather, the radio quits working again. So now I'm in the weather with my wingman very close in very, very thick cloud. I give him the lead, tell him I'm radio out again. Now he's number 3 and I'm number 4, and we are trying to keep ourselves together in a force ship formation to get through the clouds, get on initial, and then pitch out and land and look as professional as possible with all this stuff going on. And probably the most confusing part was after I came up initial as number 4, even though I was number 3. And probably one of the more difficult things we had to do was change leads in the last chance area when we landed, because they were putting the pins back in the gear. And I was then still trying to get my wingman's attention and say, I need to pull out as number 3 because they have a specified parking spot. And then, so at the end of that, when we landed and opened the canopies and got out, I kind of looked at 810 and said, see ya. I was not happy with her at that point. But she never quit. She just complained a lot. And I since flew it several times before I left the program, which was the fall of '91. And then she went on to do other things in the blackjet community while I went to other parts of my career. So run the tape forward about 30 years in John's life, and come to find out that 810 is now coming to the Pima Air Museum. So luckily, because of the excellent working relationship I have with the museum, I've been donating a lot of my materials to them, old uniforms, helmets, documents, things like that. I was able to be here when the jet arrived a couple days ago in the middle of the night. The funny thing I was telling friends is that it's supposed to arrive at 0300, which is 3 o'clock in the morning military time, and that tended to be about when we were our TOTs during the war. So I said, well, that's appropriate that the airplane's doing an 0300 arrival, time over tarmac, if you want to call it that, here in Tucson, and it made that within a couple of minutes. But so 0300 rolls around last Tuesday, and here comes a whole bunch of police cars out of the dark, and the next thing you know, it's a big flatbed truck carrying, at the time, what I thought was what's left of 810. you can see behind me that there's quite a few pieces missing. I guess those are the secret sauce special pieces that the military is keeping, which is understandable. But it was just kind of resting on some foam blocks on this big flatbed, and they brought it in the gate, and once they got it parked here at the restoration hangar, we were able to get up close and get a look at the jet. It's a mixed set of emotions, really, because the last time I saw 810, she was still fully, black, had her whole outfit on, and so a lot of that's gone. But what we hope to do is, with the museum, is to restore that so that people could see what it looked like when it was fully functional and fully combat ready. One of the more special moments for me was I was able to bring my daughter with me, who is she's not in aviation, but she is a mechanic and has a mind for machinery. So it was very special to see her just as interested in looking at the airplane and talking about some of the different aspects of it, stuff that was missing, stuff that was there, and then especially how it might go about being restored. So that's the next stage of Dark Angel's life, is her life here at the Pima Air Museum.